Welcome to United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America on WSGW. Now, here is your host, Kareem Bowen.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. We are in the studio, and we are here with Kareem, the host of this show, but also my producer, the guy who makes everything happen, who packages up, puts a nice bow on it so that those who are listening can consume it without issue. None other than John being the place to be. John, what's good?
Hello.
John, I am so ready for a change of weather. I'm ready.
Spring has sprung.
I'm hoping that is the case, but I get nervous living in the Midwest about what is coming next.
We'll get at least one more round of snow. That's my prediction. But long range, we're looking all right.
Looking pretty good. All right, so I'm gonna go with you on that one. I want to give a shout out to everyone that's listening here on 100.5 FM and 790 AM. We want you to continually just tune in. If you have something that you like to say, always post a comment. We're always interested in what you have to say. But if you're listening and you're tuning in via social media, like, tag, and share this conversation with those in your people groups. But we are going to talk about, Jonathan and I was sharing with him before the show. We talk about a lot of topics and we give our thoughts and our ideas, our opinions. But today we're going to just kind of talk to each other and just ask some questions. And he gets to ask, there's a list of questions. He gets to ask any of those questions that are on that list. And we're going to do the same thing and just kind of give some perspective and some insight in terms of who we are as the people who kind of make up 2/3 of this conversation. Shout out to my man, Mark Bassett, who's not able to be with us. I'm sure he's probably body surfing or wind sailing or paratrooping somewhere in 85-degree weather in Florida. So we can't feel sorry for him. However, we do miss him.
I heard something about Disneyland.
You're absolutely right.
That's what I heard.
He's running around looking like, where's Mickey?
Yeah.
So he's enjoying himself. I think he's got the kids and the grandkids. Y'all may not know this, but Mark is a good Catholic guy. He's got like 95 kids. I think a total of 7, enough to fill out a good Datsun or a Volkswagen station wagon. And I think that he's spending time with some of those kids. So we certainly hope that he enjoys himself. You got to get to Disneyland. It's Disneyland in Florida, correct? Disney World in California.
I've been to the one in California. I have not been to the one in Florida.
I think it's Disney World in California and Disneyland in Florida. And I'll tell you, I went to Disneyland. I made the mistake of taking kids to Disneyland it was like July 28th, something like that. The ending of July. It was so hot.
Yeah.
It was so hot that and
the humid too, right?
Oh my goodness.
Oh yeah.
It was, I think the actual temperature was like 95 to 98 with the heat index being like around 105 or 10 or something like that. So we were by the pool most of the time, but then we got to go to Disneyland. Let's go to Disneyland. So we go to Disneyland and see Mickey. And while we're there, we're doing the summer thing. We got shorts and tank tops and flip-flops, right? It is the essential summer attire. When I tell you that it was so hot that the flip-flops started sticking to the pavement, we were like running from cool ride to cool ride just to
stay in the shade as much as possible.
Yeah, I cannot do Florida between the months of June to like say the late August. After that, it's a beautiful place to live. Arizona, like me, we went to a casino one time in Arizona, and this is a number of years ago. And while we were at the casino, our shoes, like tennis shoes, literally started melting on the pavement. When they say you can cook eggs in some of these climates, they absolutely mean it. Crazy. But we want to get into today's conversation. We're going to talk about the gap between us, and we're talking about understanding the divide. We're talking about the racial divide without destroying the dialogue. And oftentimes I take us to a place that we are understanding the divide and about to blow up the dialogue. But we want to keep the dialogue in check. And so we have,
but I will say it's good to have those conversations on the edge sometimes, because if you're overly concerned about being nice, you're not going to tell the truth.
And you know what's funny is that we get that, but our listeners
have a hard time sometimes.
They have a hard time struggling. So we're gonna lube this up so that we can take. I don't want to say it that way. We're gonna take that back. We're gonna lubricate this so that we can digest the conversation that we're gonna have today. And so, what we're gonna do is Jonathan and I are gonna just simply. He gets to pick those questions, and we're gonna start. We're gonna go by those headings, and we're gonna start off talking about perception versus reality. There's a lot that we as people perceive. And, we often say that perception for many is reality, but there's certain things that we can perceive that may not necessarily be true. And then there's some things that, no, that's a real hardcore, like fact thing that is real out there. So we want to start by talking about perceived things versus what is actually real. And Jonathan, I'm going to throw it to you looking at those questions that are there. You got about 4 questions.
Yeah.
And I just want you to start. You're going to start, and then I'll follow up with the question.
All right. Well, I'm looking at a couple of them. Let's start with that first one. When you walk into a room full of white conservatives, what do you assume they think about you? That's a good question.
No, it is.
It's not what do you think they think. It's what do you assume?
What do I assume?
Yeah.
Now, let me tell you this, because I had this experience very real. Like, I took a trip to DC, and I think we talked about it for a second. And during that trip to DC, I went to, is it the National Prayer Breakfast, which the president hosts. And so already before even getting there, I'm thinking to myself, oh, this is going to be an experience. One, because I knew that it would be very Donald Trump, President Trump, because I like to respect folks regardless of who they are. I knew it would be very President Trump, and I guess that's a whole explanation in and of itself. But I knew that it would be a very conservative audience, and he tends to pander to those audiences. When I walked in to the breakfast, and now one thing that I knew was going to be crazy, because, I like to dress. So if I'm going to get dressed up, I'm going to get dressed up. And so when I walked in, I thought to myself, they're going to be like, who is this pimp walking in through the door? I'm thinking this in my mind. Like, they're going to be like, who is this Pentecostal pimp that's coming in through the door? Because I had on a red and black, it was red, black, and gray, kind of like a plaid blazer with black slacks, a white dress shirt, and a black bow tie. So you can imagine the outfit.
That's not too bad.
No, it's
but given the room,
yep. I'm going in thinking like this is going to be funny. So I go in, and it's funny. The person that I sit next to, and this is crazy, is the president's pardon attorney. And so I'm thinking like, this guy is going to think like, this dude, what do you have on in this clown suit? But I didn't care because I'm rocking it, right? And he says to me, "You're pretty bold wearing that outfit." Bingo! It was just what I perceived. But the thing was, so the conversation was light, and I'm of the faith, I'm of the opinion that in politics, we're at a place right now where you really don't know where people stand until they open their mouths.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just going to play it cool, and I'm just going in there and just going to chill and listen. And it was, the people that were around were very cordial, were very open. Many of them, like, I don't know if you're a Democrat or not, but I want to apologize for some of the things that he was saying. So it was very different in that respect, but very much so. Everybody looked at that outfit that I had on, which in a very Democratic Black community would be like, "Oh, you're looking pretty good." As a matter of fact, when I left, people were like, "We love your outfit." But in that white conservative outfit arena, they were like, "You're bold."
Did you walk in like with your guard up?
I walked in thinking this is about to be a trip. Honestly. So I guess so, yeah. I walked in thinking like, what am I about to hear? And some of that was answered in kind. But it was not as bad as I thought it would be.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, it was very interesting. The conversation, the words that were said were kind of spot on, but in terms of how I was treated in that particular moment, it was very different than what I anticipated. All right, so I'm going to flip the script and ask you the very same question. I think this is good based upon the fact that people hear you and often see you in sound bites, right? So what do you think Black listeners assume about you before you even open your mouth?
I think that has changed as I've built a little bit of a rapport with the audience here. But going into it, like, there's this feeling of needing to minimize, you know?
What do you mean?
Like, so I'm going to change it a little bit and change the context just a little bit. Early on, when I was producing this show, we went to the NAACP Freedom Fund banquet.
Right.
And we were going to conduct some interviews, and I was just there to man the equipment and make sure everything sounded good. And there was just kind of this feeling of, I can't walk in here confidently, or I'm going to be seen as some jerk, some white jerk.
The man.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. I like this feeling of, I've got to make myself small to be unthreatening.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
And that's an assumption and a feeling that I had going into it. And I just wanted to be out of the way and not make a scene. And I'm with Kareem. I'm Kareem's producer, just show that attachment.
I got my card. Kareem got me here.
Exactly.
I got a black friend.
Yeah. But like in the context of these conversations, I feel like I've got to over-explain what I'm going to say, lest it be taken out of context, lest someone hear what I say and go, so early on this show, I've said, I don't care about you as a black person. I care about you as a person.
Right.
If I say I don't care about you as a black person, that gets taken out of context.
What you mean you don't care about me as a black person?
Someone turns off their ears after that part of the sentence and gets upset. So it's kind of this feeling of, I feel like I have to qualify everything that I say so that people don't get upset, because, like it or not, as a public figure, there's a reputation aspect to certain things.
Okay, and I think that's really important. I think what you're saying is very funny. I wonder how many other white people feel that way. Because go ahead.
I think a lot. Like, we look at in the context of this show, we had a round table conversation with a bunch of people from a bunch of different backgrounds. And
Absolutely.
if you listen to how the white people talk in that, it's, well, not to discount what you're saying, and there's these little qualifiers that get thrown on.
White folks don't like talking about race.
Exactly.
It's uncomfortable.
Yeah. And they try and make their opinion smaller by adding these little qualifiers onto it.
Well, I think historically, and I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna say this to my people that's listening out there. I'm talking about my people, my brothers, my black folks out there. I think historically, white folks, they like, listen, I don't want to be in no conversation about race, because if I say something and I say you people, then what you mean you people, and then it becomes a whole situation. Oh, you racist. And what I've learned, which is crazy, and this is what I truly believe this, there are many people who are more concerned with being called racist than really if what they're doing straddles the line or is on the fence of being actually a racist.
The people who are worried about being called racists generally aren't. People who are racist don't care. Like,
well, I'll tell you, this is the difference. And this is something that I've tried to say, Jonathan, that I think is super important. I think that sometimes we can do things that can be racist or even perceived racist, since we're talking about perception versus reality. There are some things that we can do that we don't perceive as being racist, but can be very racist to the people that we're doing it with or for or around, and we just not know.
So I'm not responsible for the way you react. That's my thought on that is, I'm going to be me. I'm going to behave the way I'm going to behave. I'm not responsible for the way that you react. In the same way, you don't need to associate with me.
Absolutely.
Like,
I agree with that. But this is the thing. I think that both of us, all three of us, Mark isn't here, but I think we can speak from him on this perspective. None of us are doing anything to be intentionally racist.
And there are people who say and do things just to get a rise out of people. In which case,
absolutely.
I think you are somewhat responsible for the way someone else reacts. But yeah.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that, Jonathan?
Well,
somewhat responsible.
People who say inflammatory things just to get gotcha moments,
Okay.
People who say something, it's like if I said some things that were super borderline just to get you to call me racist, and then I went, oh, there you go, calling me racist. It has to do with the intention and kind of the.
Yeah. So one of our viewers made a statement that it's usually not offensive if it's the truth. And that's not true. I don't agree with that.
I don't agree with that either.
many times the truth can be very offensive. And I think, if you go from a biblical perspective, that was the thing about Christ. It was that he was presenting the truth against what people have created. And oftentimes the truth can be very offensive. But the reality of it is, if your desire is to know the truth, or if your desire is to be honest and be real and to understand, then you are less likely to be offended. And so I think that that's an important lesson. And even when we're having these conversations, we cannot be, and I'm learning this, we cannot always be so concerned about making sure we give you the truth or the facts, that we deny the fact that sometimes digesting the truth may take some time.
And sometimes you've got to present the truth in a way that someone else will actually listen to.
No, now what you just said is super important. I talk with folks all the time. Somebody said this to me, Jonathan, and I want to share this with you. What they said to me was like, Kareem, I tune in and I listen to those conversations that you're having with race, with those two white guys, is how they said it, with those two white men. And they said, you are the perfect person to have that conversation. And so I asked them, like, why? They said, because you're able to explain it. You're willing to explain it in a way that is non-threatening. Now, I'm not exactly sure what they mean by that, but I would think that they do to some degree. I'm not overly offended by things that are racial, but I will push back on things to make people think about what it is that they're saying when I find them in a racial position. And there's sometimes that I become the guy that you were just talking about. I'm going to say what is very controversial to put it on the table and to make people choke on it. And then once we choke on it, let's pull it back out. Let's chop it up, and then we can digest it, right? So I think it's very important for us to do that. I want to go to our. I'm going to ask the next question, and what I was like, who gets to define? This is a real question in Black America. Who gets to define reality in America? The one who lives it, or the one who studies it? Lived or studied?
That's interesting.
Experiences.
Neither.
Okay.
Lived is anecdotal. Studied is academic. Reality is reality. You don't define reality, but there are different perspectives, certainly. And kind of how you sort that out is you compare the two, and you talk about the two, and you sort through the two. And people can have completely different, people of the same background can have different lived experiences. So when you come at it and you say, well, this is the reality. No, it's not. This is the reality.
Really,
I think studied is going to give you a little bit more objective background to it and context for those lived realities. Maybe that's the way to do it, is you study it, and that puts in context your lived experiences. And then you get a little bit more of a shape of what's really going on.
This is very interesting. Your response to that is very interesting to me, because I think about this and we see what had taken place, I would say 2020, 2023 in Florida, with the redefining of kind of like what the African American experience was during slavery. And I think it was Marco Rubio or the governor down there, somebody was saying, hey, slavery was not so bad for Black folks. Actually, they learned some skills that they can then use in other forms of life. So when we look at this, are we looking at folks who have had an academic understanding of what that means and allowing them to define that? Or is my experience necessary to be understood by those who may have had an academic understanding of certain things? Because I think that the reality of an experience is something that cannot be taken away. If you've experienced in life a particular thing, then what I have learned in the world of academia has to somehow take into account your real lived experiences to fully embrace or to create an understanding of what we mean.
Well, yeah. So that sounds like somebody just looking at it academically on paper and not taking into account the lived experience. And
that's problematic, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, you need both.
Okay.
You need both.
Okay.
But at the same time, if you're just going off of lived experience, you're going with blinders on. You're not seeing the broader context of things.
What is the broad? If I've experienced something, what is the broader context? Like how would I
Rephrase
identify? So you said that if I'm only talking about what I've experienced, I'm not taking into account the broader context. If I've had a life experience and the people around me have had a life experience, how do I define a broader context of that experience?
Well, you look at historical evidence and kind of what got you to that point. If you're just looking at what's in front of you, you're not looking at what's around you, what's behind you. That's kind of what I'm saying. Is the academic is, okay, here's how things operate in the world, and from the perspective talking about slavery,
right?
Awful, terrible,
right?
Horrible thing. But when people say, well, it wasn't that bad compared to, that's academically looking at different things. No, it's still really bad though, right?
Yeah.
Like it's I don't know.
No, well,
and that's what I mean by this academic gives context for the lived experience.
Okay,
it lets you look around a little bit.
I think and I think that's important to have a contextual understanding of what we're dealing with. But I also think that when we look at the academic portion, where is that information coming from? The sources of that information are important. And what we've learned historically in this country, that the very perpetrators of the things that are often problematic are also the writers of those contents or those contexts or those texts that are part of the academic understanding. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be back with more of this conversation on United Shades of Gray. Stay tuned.
You're listening to United Shades of Gray on WSGW.
This is Kareem. We're back with more of United Shades of Gray, conversations of race in America. And I did I have the last question, or did you have last week?
You had the last one.
Jonathan and I are having kind of a different conversation in terms of how we're engaging, but we want to make sure that we are helping folks to understand the racial divide without destroying the dialogue that can be had in between the two goalposts to have a better understanding. So I'm asking him some questions, and we're doing these things personally. And then he's also asking me some questions. These are some questions that I defined earlier in advance, but we're just unveiling to get a very real response. But go ahead, John, it's your turn.
Well, I want to follow up kind of on what we were talking about, and it has to do with the question that I'm going to ask. Yeah. So I'm going to ask the question, and I'm going to give just a little brief thing.
Okay.
Well, I'll hold on. Okay. So when we talk about slavery, and I'm going to ask this one about being accused of something that you never personally participated in.
I thought about you when they
go ahead. But I want to ask you that question.
Go ahead.
But when we were talking about the difference between studying and lived experience, the academic context and the lived experience. The academic context as a white man is you benefited from slavery. White people, these systems that are put in place, et cetera, et cetera. My lived experience is, no, I haven't.
Okay.
I don't have any special legs up because of that. You put the two together and you kind of wrestle between them and kind of try and sort out reality.
Okay.
So that kind of gives an example of what we were talking about at the end of the last segment there. But I'll ask you, have you ever felt accused of something historically that you never personally participated in?
Well, that is an interesting conversation for a black man to answer in this country.
Yeah.
Have I ever felt accused of something historically that I did not participate in? I can't think of anything that fits the bill at this moment. And the reason being because my initial thought is like, what are the offenses that? Well, yeah, I can. I'll go deep and I'll pull this one out. There have been instances, and my folks that are out there in the stream, I want you to also think about this as well. There have been instances where whites have entered into black spaces, where those individuals that have entered into those spaces did not feel comfortable and were not necessarily treated as a warm and fuzzy thing. And I've seen situations where those whites have left and felt like you guys made me feel a particular way. And so in that moment, I'm like, I didn't make you feel anything. I didn't do anything to you. But I understood what they were feeling and I saw it take place. And it was interesting. And I thought in that moment, wow, white America does not understand what it means to not live in white spaces all the time. Does that make sense to you?
You've turned this on its head.
No, but I'm trying to think of a moment, and it would be that moment where I've seen white people enter into black spaces and not necessarily receive the reception, hey, I'm coming to help, I'm coming to support. And they get that, well, we got this. We don't need you for this.
So what are you being accused of in that?
Well,
system?
because in those spaces, even though it may not have been me that was a person,
you're causing a disruption.
I am a part of this collective that I took no part in, but I understood it. I understood what was going on. And in that moment, what I realized is that many whites don't understand the need for black spaces. It was my outcome. But the thing that I'm saying is that those white people came in, they were not treated with great warmth. And in many instances were not necessarily wanted to be there. And I've seen it take place. And I may have been accused of being that, even though I had nothing to do with it. And then in my personal going through and thinking and reconciling this, that was my understanding. Like there is a need for black spaces that white people don't understand. Are you understanding what I'm saying?
I think I understand what you're saying. Given the context of the question that you've put down here and how it was intended, I don't think you're answering it in a satisfactory way.
Okay, challenge me. What do you mean?
Well, so the context is a white guy being accused of benefiting from slavery. Right?
Well, that was your answering to. I didn't go back to answer that question.
But when I read that question, that's
where you go.
That's where I go mentally.
Okay.
So
Well, no. You know what? Yes. Well,
it's as if let me put it in a little bit. It's as if you went to Japan.
Yeah.
And were accused of dropping the atomic bomb.
Okay.
You know, it's that kind of historical prevalence.
Right.
And I could see a situation, and as you're talking about this, I'm like, okay, why would a white person be that uncomfortable? And it's a white person coming into a black space, or a black person coming into a white space?
No, a white person coming into
a white person coming into a black space,
yeah.
being made to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Even though you're not one of the people that participated in making
no, but I could clearly see it take place.
Flipping that around, I could see a situation where a black person comes into a white space without any connections or whatever, and there might be what's that person doing here?
Mm-hmm.
What are your intentions?
Yeah,
I could see that being
it's the same situation.
It could be. I mean, I see what you're saying. Yeah, no, I get it. I'm there.
And so the thing was, you asked me and being accused. So I was accused, like, you all treated me this way. I'm like, I didn't do anything to you.
Yeah.
I came and you guys were rude and you were mean and that's racist is what they told me. And I'm like, well, listen, first of all, I didn't have anything to do with it. Secondly, you don't understand something that's important. And that was the thing that I came away with, was that white America struggles to understand the importance for the need of blacks to have black spaces, to have black joy in the absence of white presence. Like those things are very important. Like to be able to be in a particular moment, to have a space where that can be completely theirs. And when that happens, there is a fear of like, why don't I get to be a part of what's happening? And you are ostracizing or kicking me out of this. If I did this to you, it would be racist. You understand what I'm saying?
It would be.
But there's a difference because of the historical perspective, because any place we go in the United States, for the most part, are white spaces.
But they're not.
In most cases.
I disagree with that.
Okay, what spaces would you not consider white spaces?
Anything. Go to the grocery store. Is that not a white space? Go to a church. We've talked about the siloing of churches. But
that is one example. That is not a white space. The church, I would give you that, because churches are very segregated in their nature. But if you talk about a grocery store, how many grocery stores do you go to that are Black owned or predominantly Black folks in the grocery store? You would have to go to a very defined location.
So you're doing it based on demographics.
Well, no, I'm saying that based upon going into a space and the narrative or the control of that space, or the how that space is set up or provided to the community is not centered around whiteness. It is, and not that people are like, I'm going to create a white space. I don't think that that's the intention, but I think that people are creating things, and you create it based upon, your understanding what you believe is important and what you value. And so when we look at a state like Michigan that only has, I think, purported one Black grocery store in America, I think that further drives the understanding of what I'm saying, that the idea of white people being in Black spaces is almost non-existent unless you go to a Black church, unless you go to a Black community forum or a Black community group. That is, are you understanding what I'm saying?
I think so.
Okay.
I think I disagree with the premise that it would be significantly different.
What do you mean would be significantly different?
What's different about a Black-owned store than a white-owned store?
Well, one, I'm gonna go get some turnip greens, some collard greens. I can get some salt pork, some ham. That means I can go in there and get spices and things that are specific to my culture and the things. We can't find those things. We have to go to a certain grocery store in a certain location in order to get certain things. And some things we still don't find in grocery stores. We have to get from somebody who makes them or who produces them as a specialty because they know that they're not absent. So that is an example that most white Americans don't have to worry about, because stores and what's in a store and what's in a place is more like. Another example, the rise of Black designers. The reason why there was a need for, and I'll start with FUBU, for us, by us. That's what FUBU stood for. The Sheridan Market is a, thank you, Cheryl. But designers, Sean John, which is kind of like a bad thing. Diddy's a bad thing now. But we look at Rockaware and Black labels. Those labels and those designers were created because Black folks couldn't find jeans that fit. Typically, they have a little thicker posterior area, and we're struggling to find jeans that fit. And the industry ignored that because it's largely run by a non-Black space or entities, and so they're not marketing toward. When you look at a supermodel, and what we've defined as what is beautiful in this nation and what hits the runway, if there are African American or Black women, or when I say Black women, I mean even international women, they are usually made, with the exception of now, there is now a change in an understanding of that Black beauty or appreciation of that Black beauty. Those Black sisters have either had to halfway starve themselves, which is, being a model is bad, but their hips were always a problem. They don't make sample size is a size 2, and Black women come with hips for the most part. White women tend to be more busty. Black women tend to have more butt. And so those types of things, when they're looking at how, and it may seem like a small thing, but being able to fit clothes that go on, that are in a store, is who are you producing this for? And so it's an example of not having those spaces. But I think that's interesting. I don't know what our listeners, and I see them making comments out there in our social media stream, but it's really interesting. I want to go to the next thing real quick, because this time goes by so fast. It disappears. All right, let's talk about, since we're here, the weight of history and who carries that weight. So I'm going to ask number 2. Do you believe white America truly understands how history still impacts present day Black life? Those of you in the social media stream, I'd like to hear your answers as well. Thank you, John C. Frost. The question once again, do you believe white Americans truly understand how history still impacts present day Black life?
I think that the perception from white America is, why are you so caught up on the past?
I'm sorry. Somebody said, Cosmo says you're fat. Well, I ain't down with that. It's Sir Mix-a-Lot. But anyways, go ahead.
I think that's all I've got. Is I think a lot of white America thinks, why are you so caught up in the past?
Mm-hmm.
And you look at the conversations that Mark and I have and the perspectives that we take is things have progressed so much in these realms. When we're talking about civil liberties, civil rights movement, stuff like that, historically, why are you so caught up on the past if this is where you're at now?
Right.
I think that's kind of the opinion, or it's a total blind spot of, hey, these people had the same history as us. I would agree. No, Black and white America did not have the same history. I would argue until probably the 70s is when it started becoming the same history. But even then, it's been 50 years since then. So that's where you get the opinions of Mark and I going, we've got the same history. We've got the same modern history at this point.
Okay. And you said that to say what? To mean what? We have the same modern history.
I mean, when we talk about understanding how history still impacts present day Black life, I think we have a different understanding of that history, and
what's different in terms of we understand, I guess.
Well, my understanding, like, the conversation always goes back to slavery. Okay, yes,
America's original sin.
Yeah,
right.
We get up to the night. I agree. We had different histories. The Black and white Americans had very different experiences of America. I would argue until the civil rights movement brings them together, and now we're moving forward as one. So when the conversation goes back to slavery, it is, why does that keep coming up? We solved that in the 60s. We solved that in the 70s. We solved that with the civil rights movement. We're back together. We're together on this, I think, is kind of the understanding. And I think that is a crude outline of my understanding, I guess.
Well, I guess my thing is, you said something that I want to get a clarification. Is it your understanding that the civil rights movement solved slavery?
No.
Okay.
No, but I mean, when we look at the history being separated, I'm saying it didn't solve slavery.
Okay. But you said it,
but we become one history at that point is kind of my.
And what does that one history mean? I asked you that question before. When you say that we become one history, what does that mean?
It means the things that have affected you for the past 50 years have also affected me.
Are they proportionately, or does it? My question is, does the civil rights movement and the things that existed or happened during that time, from that period, so let's say 1972, though, which is kind of like the last civil rights legislation, from that period of time, which is, just 1 year before I was born, when we look at that legislation, are we saying that from that point, the things that have happened in our history from that point proportionately affect us both? Like, there's not a disproportionality to the effects of things that have existed from that period of time?
There's going to be a disproportionality either way.
Okay.
And I don't think that it's only poorly affecting Black communities. White communities had things that hit them harder than they hit Black communities.
Like what?
We look at distribution of taxation. We look at things relating to...
What do you mean by distribution of taxation? Because that confuses me.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm confused by that one.
Okay. I'll get off of that one because I'm not as informed on it.
Okay, we'll throw it away.
But we look at things where social welfare programs, largely targeting, and I'd say to the detriment of Black communities, the handouts, well, they're coming from somewhere. They're coming from more affluent communities.
Okay.
And so you're taking from one, giving to the other. It's bad for both.
Right.
but it does affect those communities differently, and you're hearing me think through this in real time.
No,
So this isn't.
I'm glad you're thinking through it because we say this, and this is where we talk about reality versus perception.
Yeah.
Because white America often lives with the perception that when we look at the social welfare programs that existed and those that were brought into place were done so with the benefit of African Americans in mind. But they weren't. And neither were they constructed, nor have they been implemented in that way, nor have the results of the statistics or history proven that to be the case. The facts of the matter, and we've talked about this before.
Who have they been good for?
But I don't think that in the way that I think that the thought of something, this is how Congress can create something that sounds good, but the implementation matters. And so who have they benefited?
Yeah.
They have not been the greatest benefactor for most of the social programs that we have been white America, and particularly white women in America. When we look at things such as the GI Bill, which was supposed to help folks who were coming back to be able to afford housing. You've been away, you've been displaced, you haven't been able to work. Now you're coming back, you should not be homeless. That bill was created in a way that disenfranchised Blacks from even being able to partake in that particular bill for the beginning and its inception. It was outlined to keep Blacks who were in the military from being able to own homes. So when we talk about history, and I always say that the racism is always in the policy. And oftentimes we can do things, but if we take it from the perspective that we are going to start from this point and move forward and everyone is equal without understanding historical context, we are doomed to repeat those same mistakes again. So those are things that as we look at those things, I think that they're very, very important. When we look at the social welfare programs, I don't think that how we've implemented those programs benefit, especially when there is still bias in the process of how we implement programs. We further injure folks who have been injured in the past. And so we look at, as we said, the affirmative action. We look at those programs for veterans coming home. A lot of the things that have existed. We look at schools and how we implement those things. They were intended with a particular purpose, and when not completely entered and without bias, they sometimes injure the people that we sometimes want them to help. But go ahead.
So when we look at a historical perspective of things, do you think we're still living in separate timelines, to borrow that term?
Say that again.
Do you think Black America and white America has a separate history, as I put it, more recently?
I think that we have a very good question. I think that historically, from a contextual standpoint, if we were to put it in a book, history has been very much the same.
Yeah.
But when we look at how that history has impacted the people, understanding demographic, understanding history, those things are very different. And the impact has been very different. I'm going to yield the next 30 seconds over to you if you like, or I can close.
You go ahead.
All right. Okay. So to continue that conversation, I just think that when we look at where we have been, it's important to understand the context of history. You can give me an opportunity, but if contextually and historically, I have not been allowed to prepare for that opportunity, you can give me the opportunity. If I've not been able to prepare, I cannot fully engage and receive the benefit of the opportunity that takes place.
I would kind of argue that we're on much more equal footing than we were. We're moving in much the right direction when it comes to unifying those things. And I would say some of those things aren't as necessary anymore.
Okay. And I think that a lot of the country would agree. We're going to put a pin in for there. We'll talk to you next week with more United Shades of Gray.